Today is Tuesday, June 10th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Gavin Newsom and California sue the Trump administration. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to, if you haven't already, it would be great so I just don't have to say this anymore, but just go ahead and subscribe to the show. Give us a rating. Send us your thoughts. You can email us, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me now to get through all the news of the day, as we do each and every weekday, bright and early, CBN's Trey Goins-Phillips and Madison Seals. And Madison, on the focus story, Simone Biles goes after Riley Gaines, and they're going after each other there on X.
Yeah, this debate started over the weekend and is still going. It's about the issue of protecting women's sports that Gaines has become a huge advocate for, and she made some really great points that we'll get into today.
Yeah, important issue. So we'll get a peek into that conversation there and all the controversy surrounding that particular issue. On the main thing, singer Tasha Layton recently revealed the biggest miracle she's seen in her life. Billy Hallowell has that on the main thing coming up in just a few minutes. Make sure you're subscribed to all of our CBN News podcasts if you're not already. Newsmakers with Billy, Trey's Faith and Culture, John Stolness, Navigating Trump 2.0, and Abigail Robertson's Heaven Meets Earth. A lot of great podcast offerings coming from CBN and CBN News, so make sure you've got all those on your must-listen list. All right, we are going to head to the news now in 90 seconds. And California AG Rob Bonta and Governor Gavin Newsom are suing the Trump administration, calling the deployment of the Guard in California there an unlawful action. It's the first time in decades that a president has deployed the Guard without state consent. Protesters have lit self-driving cars on fire, waved Palestinian and Mexican flags, while throwing concrete bricks and blocks at police cars from a highway overpass. Dozens were arrested over the weekend. Local officials called it one of the most volatile nights in recent LA history. 300 National Guard troops are currently active, 500 Marines on standby. Trump says the action prevented LA from being completely obliterated. President Trump hosted a White House roundtable yesterday to promote a new $1,000 investment account for every U.S. newborn called Trump Accounts. Under the plan, each newborn citizen gets $1,000 in a stock market index fund managed by their guardians. Parents or others can contribute up to $5,000 per year into the account. The accounts are part of the GOP's domestic policy bill known as the One Big Beautiful Bill. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. Guys, this whole situation in California is just completely insane, and it sure seems like it's very political. And these government officials, Gavin Newsom, clearly has presidential aspirations, and so he's not going to just give President Trump really a chance to sort of say, hey, look what I'm doing here. Look what I'm doing to help the situation in California. They're going to use these opportunities to fight one another. And so the party lines are being drawn. And I've got to play this clip for you guys just to show you how ridiculous this whole thing has come. This is from the local ABC News station there in California, reporting over the weekend on the riots. Listen to this.
Large group of people. It could turn very volatile if you move law enforcement in there in the wrong way and turn what is just a bunch of people having fun watching cars burn into a massive confrontation and altercation between officers and demonstrators.
So
that is what you're dealing with here when you listen to the media. So essentially what they're saying is the Democratic Party line, which is these protests were just peaceful. Nothing going on here. Just people having fun watching cars burn. I mean, Trey, how many weekends have you had just watching cars in the center of town burn? We all do it multiple times per year. Clearly, I'm being very sarcastic here, but that is the insanity of the mainstream media to take this party line that, oh, well, everything's great. Everything's fine and dandy. It's just normal run-of-the-mill burning of cars, having a great old time, and then the federal troops come in, and that could really escalate things. I mean, I don't even know what to do with that. I mean, that's just, it's so beyond the pale, but an actual reporter said that on live television.
Well, it's definitely enlightening, right? I mean, we've we've learned now that 2020 was not riots at all. It was actually just, fun-loving, well-intentioned people looting businesses, setting streets on fire, destroying cars, defecating in the streets. That was just like a good time.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that I can look back on that memory fondly now.
Yeah.
It's been reimagined in my imagination. But
it's unbelievable.
No, I think you're absolutely right about Gavin Newsom. He has presidential aspirations. And the flip side of that coin is he knows that this is a massive problem. Now, you can argue about how it should be addressed. Maybe the Trump administration should be doing something differently, and that's fine if you want to have those conversations. But Newsom, I think, has a desire here not only to deflect because, like I said, he has presidential aspirations, but he wants to take the focus away from the problem that actually exists, right?
Yeah,
There
right.
is an issue there that needs to be taken care of, and he has failed in taking care of it entirely, and that's why we're at the point we're at.
Yeah, it's not surprising to see another lawsuit against Trump's actions, but it is ridiculous. Governor Newsom said the deployment is a, quote, illegal act, an immoral act, an unconstitutional act. Yet so is much of the quote unquote having fun that's going on in LA right now, like burglaries. You mentioned setting cars on fire or throwing rocks at police cars and vandalizing businesses. And like you said, Trey, it's reminiscent of some of the George Floyd protests we saw during COVID. And it makes you wonder what it will take for a governor to step in and protect the people in their state.
Yeah, it really does. And we will continue reporting on what is going on over at cbnnews.com, faithwire.com, and giving you certainly not an analysis that will involve describing violent protesters as just a bunch of crazy kids having a normal fun time, gathering around the burning cars and roasting s'mores. It's just not the thing you're going to find at a credible news organization like CBN News. All right, we are going to head over to the focus story now. And as we mentioned at the top here, Madison, Simone Biles, the Olympic gymnast, and Riley Gaines were exchanging words on the issue of men competing against women in sports. And it's interesting to see where each kind of fell on the issue.
Yeah. So first of all, most of our audience knows both of these women, but for those who don't, Simone Biles is an Olympic gymnastics champion, and Riley Gaines is a former competitive swimmer who has become known for campaigning against trans women or, men competing in women's sports. And as far as I'm aware, these two haven't had a whole lot of interaction in the public eye, even though they're both well-known athletes. But a debate started between the two of them on Friday that has gained a whole lot of attention when Simone Biles posted on X calling Gaines, quote, truly sick for criticizing a Minnesota high school for allowing a male athlete on a girls' softball team. And Gaines shared a post from the Champlain Park Rebels highlighting their state championship win and noting that the school had turned off the comments on their photo, which Gaines says is to be expected when your star player is a boy. And it's a picture of the whole team. You can see the boy on the team. Biles then responded to the post by really attacking Gaines' character and calling her a sore loser, saying that she's doing all this campaigning because she lost a race to a man, by the way. And Biles also said Gaines should be uplifting the trans community and finding ways to make sports inclusive. And there's more to discuss since then that we can get into because this debate has kept going. But I think it's worth discussing because this back and forth really encapsulates the whole debate around men competing in women's sports and the trans ideology imposing on women in general. It's just particularly interesting since Biles is also a female and you would think would be able to understand Gaines' point of view.
Right. And I think you're right. I think this particular back and forth, not so much to pick one side or the other, whether it's Biles or Gaines or whatever. But I think it's interesting from a Christian perspective to know where this conversation is going, because if you're a Christian, you care about the truth. And clearly people who are saying they're a man or a woman when they're actually a man is untruthful. And we can talk about how to best care for those people and best witness to those people. But allowing them to just continue and play in sports does not seem like the most logical conclusion. So it's interesting to me to watch where these conversations land and what arguments people are deploying so that we can be equipped to have this conversation whenever it comes up in our neck of the woods. But I want to elaborate that on that in a minute, but I want to hear more about where the argument did go and continue as it apparently dragged on.
Yeah, and to your last point, that's a great point because that's basically what Gaines was pointing out and commenting on the photo in the first place. Basically just pointing out there is a man in the photo. This is a high school team. It's not a little league team. There's a very obvious difference there. She was just pointing out the truth. But that turned into this argument. They went back and forth Friday night on X for a bit. And then Biles tagged Riley Gaines and said, bully someone your own size, which would ironically be a male, which is ridiculous for a lot of reasons. One, because she's supposedly against bullying in general, according to her first post, but also because, as Gaines pointed out later, she's a very average size woman and not near as big as male competitors would be. But Gaines wasn't petty in her next reply, and instead she said how disappointing it is to see Biles rooting for men in women's sports, especially, as one comment pointed out, because Biles never had to compete against a male, but Gaines did. And Gaines said, it's not my job or the job of any woman to figure out how to include men in our spaces. And she said, you can't uplift men stealing championships in women's sports with your platform. Men don't belong in women's sports, and I say that with my full chest. And this was really the point Gaines focused on during a recent episode of her podcast called Gaines for Girls, where she took a little bit more time to respond to Biles' posts on X and even invited Simone Biles to come on for an episode to further debate the issue, which I don't believe Biles has responded to yet. Maybe she will. I think that would be a really interesting podcast if they end up doing that. But I think Gaines handled herself and the topic really well. I mean, she's a pro at talking about this issue by now, but she was respectful to Biles and her athletic accomplishments while also challenging her that women should have to fight for equal opportunity in sports. And she said Biles basically tarnished her reputation by taking this stance in such a really disrespectful and aggressive way, which I agree with. I think Biles has set a great example for aspiring young gymnasts, but now she's arguing a position that may take opportunities away from those girls who looked up to her.
Yeah, absolutely. And a few things come to mind as you're going through the details on this. Twitter lives forever and X lives forever. And so things you tweeted back 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago are still there unless you go back and physically delete them. And Simone Biles actually tweeted something. I'm not sure what she was responding to, but you could see her tweet saying, well, thank goodness the men don't compete about us or we wouldn't have any medals. So she knows that competing against men is going to be problematic for the women in that category. And that's something so patently obvious that everyone with eyes knows is true. So there's that. She knows that. She knows the truth on that. So why in the world is she taking this side on the issue? And I think it can only be boiled down to people feel like this is the safer way to go. I guess in some circles, they think it's the safer way to go. I'm being essentially woke and that's going to win me points with this sponsor and that sponsor. But it's interesting, guys, because I don't know if you've seen this trend, but there are reports going around that Democrats now, ahead of the coming midterms and then eventually another presidential election in a few years, are trying to figure out how to, quote unquote, unwoke themselves. It's like they're kind of realizing, okay, maybe we've gone a little bit too far here. We saw this with, ironically, Gavin Newsom, who we talked about earlier in this podcast episode. But you could see in his podcast appearances that he's been doing more and more lately that they're like, wait a minute, all of a sudden he's not so bullish on some of these woke issues. And I think they're realizing that these are unpopular issues for Democrats. I mean, when you start taking the sides of Mexican traffickers, rioters in Los Angeles, abortionists who are killing babies in the womb, supporting men who are playing against women. It's like this is not exactly popular among most people, and they're not excited about these things. And Democrats are like, well, wait a minute, we've been championing these extremists. I mean, just remember, guys, they had LGBT trans activists on, I think, I don't know what day it was, but at the White House. And then they're on the White House lawn, flashing their shirt and going half nude at the White House. And then it's too much. It's just too much for most people at this point. And I think Democrats are finally realizing that.
Well, for this argument between Simone Biles and Riley Gaines, I think it's obvious the women who are defending transgender athletes in women's sports are the women who've never competed against a man.
Right.
So
she's already achieved what she can achieve at this point. So
yeah.
It doesn't hurt her. It doesn't hurt her to say, let all the men compete against me in the Olympics and let's see what happens.
Right, exactly. She has no longer does she have any skin in the game. This is all about money and clout and celebrity and notoriety. And it's unfortunate, right? It's unfortunate to see an athlete who is as successful as Simone Biles, who gets as much attention, has such the platform the size that she has. They're few and far between, right? They're athletes that have this much clout and this many people listening to them, and that she would be willing to bow down to, I guess, corporate greed and, some significant spiritual blindness as well. I don't want to discount that, but that she would be willing to give up on the women who she has competed with her entire life in order to gain what? I guess more money. That really is unfortunate because she could really be a voice for true reason in this. But I'm glad that Gaines is having the conversation and is saying what she's saying, because if nothing else, this back and forth between the two athletes, it's at least getting people to think about it and talk about it more. So,
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it says a lot about Gaines and her argument that she can confidently defend herself in her position without attacking the character of her opponent. And she brought up Biles and all of her successes and acknowledged those things while still saying, it's sad to see you take this position because you haven't experienced what a lot of other women have, and you had this opportunity to stand up for them, and now you've claimed the other side. And like you were talking about, Dan, it's hard to be consistent in your arguments when they're not based on truth. How do you maintain consistency in these progressive arguments when they're just going to keep changing over time? And I think that's part of what we're seeing as well. Not only are they unpopular, but you can't really trace them back to any sort of stronghold or truth. And so people just lose sight of what they should actually be caring about and concerned about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like I said, I do think it's important to listen to these arguments to understand where the other side is. I saw a clip just the other day of someone talking about this issue, and it was more related to abortion, but they were talking about men and women. And the person said something to the effect of, well, are you, to the pro-life person, saying, do you follow science? And he said, yes. And they said, well, the science that the whole men and women thing is a construct of this and that. And I'm just like, man, the lengths people are going to call basic gender biology, some construct that doesn't exist because people have mental delusions about what they are. That just shows where we are as a society. And listen, we have to, whether like it or not, we have to be prepared to deal with these conversations, because you can put your head in the sand as long as you want, but at some point you're going to be forced to engage in this conversation. And so we may as well be equipped for it. But appreciate that, Madison, bringing that one to the podcast today. And we're going to head over to the main thing now. And as we mentioned at the top of the podcast, singer Tasha Layton recently revealed the biggest miracle she's seen in her life, explaining the powerful ways God provided healing for her and her husband, Keith. She joined Billy on the red carpet of the K-Love Fan Awards to talk about this incredible miracle. That conversation is today's main thing.
What are you most excited about tonight?
Oh, I get so excited to be here because I get to see all my friends, all the artists and musicians who I don't normally get to see because we're touring in different directions. That is always really fun. And so I just feel like it's a whole reunion.
Okay, so we're going to get a little deep now.
Okay.
What is God showing you, teaching you, correcting maybe in you this year?
God gave me a word at the beginning of the year to take care of myself and my physical health health, and I have been really trying to do that and honor that, because a lot of times when God tells you to rest, it's because there's a busy season coming, or when he tells you to take care of your body, it's for a reason. Same thing when I am praying and I feel him say, save some money. It's always for a reason. So that's what I've been doing this year, and, you know, supplements and healthy eating and doing all the things. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm living right now.
I love it. I love it. Okay.
That's spiritual.
Well, it is, and we often separate that out and pretend that it's not, right? When it comes to physical health, we sort of separate it out like it doesn't matter. We don't have to have self-control in that area. I don't know if you want to reflect on that at all.
Yeah, well, I think I just started a Christian mental health initiative last year, a nonprofit, and I think we tend to live in one of two areas. Either we pray it away or we take a pill for everything, and so I really want to marry the two perspectives and help shed some light on the fact that maybe you do need to eat better and go take a walk and get out in the sun and stop scrolling on your phone, you know, like just overall health and wellness. And so that's what God's been teaching me this year.
I love that. Okay, what is the biggest miracle you have seen in your life, something that you've experienced or somebody around you has, when you think back to all the amazing things that have happened?
Well, this one is really special for me because I don't know if you know my story, but my husband and I couldn't have kids. And so he had known for over 8 years that he was infertile, and it was due to a back injury, and I was told I would have to have shots and a surgery. And long story short, we were on a mission trip to Uganda, and I was leading a song called Miracles, and I looked to my right, and Keith is on the ground crying. And he comes up to me in the middle of the song, and he says, I think God just healed my back. And they prayed for us that night that we'd be able to have a baby, and we were pregnant 3 months later. So yes, that's a huge miracle. I have seen so many miracles in my life, and that's one of the reasons I can't ever shake my faith, is because you can't deny those things. And that's how Jesus showed his power to the world too, was through miracles. And so I think miracles are in God's heart, and they bring faith to those who might not have it. And so I'm glad you asked that question. I love that you shared that, because I mean, I was going to say, how did it shape your faith? And you just said it. I mean, how do you not believe after you've gone through something like that? Yeah, you can't. And it's especially when it involves your own, you know, life and well-being. I've seen cancer disappear. I've seen people get delivered from demons. I've seen people's anxiety and depression healed fully in an instant. A lot of things. So man, isn't God good? We could
God
just
is
stay
so
all
good.
night and talk about that.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's my honor.
All right, short interaction, but it packed a lot in there in just a couple minutes. So appreciate Billy. Always the tough assignments that Billy gets, Trey, right? Going down to the red carpet and mingling with all the celebrities.
Right. I mean, somebody's got to suffer, you know.
Somebody's got to suffer. Well, some of us might consider that, but that's a whole nother story. I won't elaborate on that anymore. Appreciate that, Billy, though. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We are looking today at 1 John 1, verses 6 and 7. It says, we're lying if we say we have fellowship with God, but go on living in spiritual darkness. We're not practicing the truth. But if we're living in the light as God is in the light, then we have fellowship with each other, and the blood of Jesus, his son, cleanses us from all of our sin.
This is such a great reminder that our culture is all too quick to forget about, that faith is expressed through obedience, and fellowship with God every day makes us more like him, which is our ultimate goal.
Absolutely. And, you know, I think a lot of people sometimes miss the aspect of love and what love actually is. And love is obedience to following God. And, you know, this verse helps us remind us of that. And so that's a good spot to leave it on the podcast today. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here tomorrow with more. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Be safe. God bless. See you back here tomorrow.